Just imagine how much better your fantasy team would be, what type of record you could have in your league if you had already stashed Rico Dowdle before he broke out in fantasy football and turned into a superstar. Well, that's the entire goal of today's video, to help you beat the breakout. The guys that are going to be in next week's waiver wire videos as the next great breakouts, we want to find them before they break out. Now we're going to separate these stashes into positions and I will rank them. So you can actually pause your screen now if you want to go to a specific part of the video to watch. There are also time codes down below. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you find any value in today's video and subscribe. And I am guaranteeing a reply to the first 3 comments of every video this year. Just quickly, in case you're in a very small league, like an 8 or a 10 team league, all the guys that are rostered right now should already be rostered. They'll take precedent over any of the other names that we'll discuss in today's video. Specifically, Woody Marks, I want to highlight just quickly. Yes, it was disappointing the last time out versus the Baltimore Ravens. However, he still led the team in snap percentage. So I would say he would be one of the best waiver wire pickups in your league if he's still out there. I would not be shocked if he comes out and has a great game this week. Okay, before we jump into every position, I want you guys to be aware of 4 potential trades that could happen before the NFL trade deadline that would impact fantasy football. The deadline is November 4th in the NFL. First off, Breece Hall. Breece Hall could be traded. There have been plenty of rumors. In fact, shout out to Connor Hughes, who's one of the best follows on X and on YouTube. He mentions that Breece Hall posted a hashtag free 20 post on his Instagram recently. He's been one of the hottest trade, potentially rumors. Now, he talks to some front offices this week and said that their consensus on his value is a 5th round pick, potentially a 4th if 2 teams compete for him. One GM, when asked, said a 3rd is way too rich. But ultimately, this is a player that is on his last year of his deal with the Jets. He's not going to be signed long-term. So it makes every sense in the world for the Jets to ship him off somewhere else. I'm sure Breece Hall owners love hearing that. Now, if Breece Hall is actually traded, the biggest beneficiary is going to be Isaiah Davis. If that transaction were to happen in the next couple weeks, in the next couple hours, then Isaiah Davis would be the hottest pickup on every waiver wire. So if he's out there, he definitely deserves to be stashed because he would instantly be the number 1 running back for a team. That's very hard to find, right? Braylon Allen's out for, 8+ weeks. So definitely stash Isaiah Davis. Okay, the second trade that could happen is Jakobi Meyers. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but before the season began, Jakobi Meyers met with this team and actually requested a trade. They didn't honor the trade, but he requested it. Obviously, this team is not winning many games. There's no long-term contract in place for Jakobi Meyers. There's plenty of teams that need a wide receiver. For example, the Steelers are one of those names that are involved with a Jakobi Meyers trade. So it makes all the sense in the world for these 2 teams to look for a different pairing. The beneficiary here would be Trey Tucker. In smaller leagues, maybe he's available. In most of your bigger leagues, he's rostered. How about Jack Besh? We'll talk about more about Jack Besh later, but I really love the 2nd round pick, guys. I think he could have a role very soon. The third trade that could happen is either Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed. Obviously, the Saints are fielding calls. We already found out that Alvin Kamara said he doesn't want to move away from New Orleans, but they could still move on from Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed as one of the worst teams in the NFL right now. Like we already said, the Steelers are in contention for either an Olave, a Jakobi Meyers, according to rumors, right? But we've also got, people like Anthony Rivardo over on Twitter talking about how Tom Pelissero on Rich Eisen's show had mentioned that, the Olaves, the Ridleys, the Myers, the Waddles, these are all guys that are rumored. We also saw on October 13th, Wesley Steinberg, who's actually a beat writer for the New York Giants, talking about how the Giants are closing in on a trade for the Chris Olave from the Saints. The Giants desperately need wide receiver. I mean, we're just seeing like the Shaheeds and the Olaves, they're coming up in all of these rumor talks. So again, the big beneficiary here, I actually think is probably Jawan Johnson. I mean, Devon Vele is there, but I'm not going to tell you to pick up Devon Vele. Like, we're not that crazy, right? We're not going to tell you to do something like that, but there could be a beneficiary in New Orleans. Maybe that's actually Alvin Kamara as a receiving threat. Maybe that's Jawan Johnson, but be aware of these potential moves. Okay, one more trade that's been swirling around everywhere for multiple weeks, if not more than a month, is Mark Andrews, right? Obviously, there's no long-term deal with Mark Andrews and the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are 1-5 right now. They have Isaiah Likely. They want to invest in Isaiah Likely long-term. So obviously, if Mark Andrews is on the move, and there's been so many different reporters, different resources that have said he could be on the move, then Isaiah Likely probably becomes a must-start waiver wire tight end every single week. Okay, let's jump into all of the positions, and I will rank my favorite guys from top to bottom, starting off with Tyjae Spears. Now, what you need to know is that the head coach in Tennessee has been fired, as well as the play caller. So we have no idea what loyalties there will be with this new head coach, interim head coach, new play caller. And just last week, even before Brian Callahan was fired, we did see, Tyjae Spears, his snap rate jumped up significantly. You can see Tyjae Spears there about 59% of the snaps. And obviously Tony Pollard was the one who took a loss because he only had 42% of the snaps. Now that didn't turn into any huge fantasy day, right? He had 5 carries, 31 yards, but 6.2 yards per carry, had 4 targets. If we're going to see Tyjae Spears get up there around the, 8 carries, 4 to 5 targets per game mark, he will be kind of equivalent to what a Jaylen Warren is. That could be a very valuable player in fantasy football. If he has more juice than Tony Pollard, if they want to see what he has, I'm sure the new coaching staff is not going to shy away from that. You can see Michael Florio actually put it out in a really easy way to see here. 5 carries compared to 10 for Tony Pollard, but more routes run, more involvement in the air for Tyjae Spears. And what do you expect the Tennessee Titans this season to look like? Do you expect them to be down in games constantly? I do. And if you do, then Tyjae Spears might be in the more valuable back, even if it's a split backfield anyway. So that's definitely something that I want to be a part of. All right. Second player we can talk about here is Kenneth Gainwell. Now, Kenneth Gainwell, if you guys don't remember, before their bye week, Jaylen Warren was ruled out with an injury. Then he came in versus Minnesota, 31 fantasy points, was dominant on the ground, was dominant through the air, and we are starting to see his role grow in Pittsburgh. Last week, he had 6 carries as well as 6 targets, so 12 total touches. And if we go back and we look at the Steelers' backfield, not only are they getting more involvement for Kenneth Gainwell, but we're also seeing more involvement for Caleb Johnson. So are they trying to phase out Jaylen Warren? I don't know the answer right now, but Kenneth Gainwell looks good every time he touches the ball. He had 12 touches compared to 11 for Jaylen Warren. If that split kind of gets closer and closer, Kenneth Gainwell could have a lot of value with an offense that loves to utilize their running backs. Okay, let's quickly talk about Jaden Blue. If you don't know, Miles Sanders is out for the year, so Jaden Blue is more of a handcuff than anything. But if Javonte Williams were to miss time, Jaden Blue would be a must start every week in a great offense. So he is a must roster handcuff. Okay, next let's talk about Brashard Smith. Now, it hasn't been pretty for Brashard Smith just yet. He hasn't had many opportunities, unfortunately. But at some point, I could see this offense really wanting to involve Brashard Smith, not only through the air as the Jet McKinnon role, but also on the ground. He's so explosive every time he touches the ball, man. If you're a Chiefs fan out there, you know this. Every time you watch a game, when Brashard Smith has the ball in his hands, good things happen. The hope here is that in a great offense over the course of the next couple weeks, Brashard Smith really carves out a fantasy relevant role for himself. Okay, at number 5, DJ Giddens. Again, another handcuff, but think about it, guys. The most valuable offenses, the clear handcuff behind their starting running back should always be rostered. Right now, rostered in just 7% of sleeper leagues, less in ESPN and Yahoo. Guys, obviously, he is not Jonathan Taylor. I think we can all agree on that. But if Jonathan Taylor were to go down, and we've seen that almost every year of his career, don't forget the years where Zach Moss was a must-start every week because of a Jonathan Taylor injury. He's getting so much work, and unfortunately, the reality is in fantasy football, when running backs have a high workload, there is typically some opportunities for them to be injured. And again, I'm not wishing that on him, but if Jonathan Taylor were to go down, DJ Giddens would be a must-start each and every single week. There is just no competition outside of DJ Giddens in this backfield. All right, how about Ray Davis? Now, I know Ty Johnson is there, guys. I don't care about Ty Johnson. If James Cook goes down, Ray Davis will be the first and second down back. They already showed us that last year. You can see throughout Ty Johnson's entire career, his role has never changed with the Bills, regardless of injuries. Ray Davis would be the beneficiary as a first and second down back in a great offense. All right, how about Sean Tucker? This whole news with Bucky Irving is starting to get really concerning for me as a Bucky Irving owner. There's reports that he might not be back until after their bye week, which would be week 10. And Sean Tucker is an effective running back. If anything were to happen to Rachaad White, you would start him each and every week. And obviously, if there's some serious injury to Bucky Irving and they're not letting us in on exactly what it is just yet, then everybody would run to the waiver wire and grab Sean Tucker if some sort of injury were to come out. Okay, let's talk about Kyle Monangai here. Now, honestly, DeAndre Swift had played really poorly for the first 4 weeks of the season. And our bet in Kyle Monangai was, hey, maybe after the bye, they get him more involved. Now, he was pretty involved in the offense. That was awesome to see. 34% of the snaps, 6 touches, used in the air as well. But unfortunately, DeAndre Swift just looked incredible. They definitely changed up their run scheme, running a lot more outside zone than kind of forcing DeAndre Swift in the middle of the field between the tackles. But right now, DeAndre Swift looks locked and loaded, but Kyle Monanga is nothing more than a handcuff, unfortunately, if we're honest. Earlier in the video, we talked about how there are a bunch of trade rumors right now before the trade deadline. Guys, there is going to be inevitably change in fantasy football in the next couple of weeks. If you want my latest up-to-date rankings, both for weekly and rest of season, as soon as I hit submit, all you got to do is become a promo code LAND, season pass member with the Flock fantasy site. It's a $34 one-time purchase with my code. And not only do you get all of the rankings, you get the premium tools on the site like the trade calculator, as well as some vouchers to come on our live stream and ask us fantasy football questions. You can check that out in the description if you want to support the channel and have some fun. Okay, let's jump to wide receivers. Now, this is probably one of the biggest waiver wire pickups, so we won't spend too much time on this, but if Luther Burden is somehow available in your league, he needs to be picked up. Electric rookie wide receiver. Right now, Olamide Zaccheaus is obviously kind of ruining the party. Right now, Zaccheaus on Monday Night Football played 54 snaps compared to just 15 for Luther Burden. But when he's on the field, he had 4 targets, 4 catches for 51 yards. I mean, he was very effective for this team. He's been effective every time they've targeted him. In fact, he only has 1 target that didn't turn into a reception this entire season. Now, if DJ Moore is going to miss time, which we've heard that he could miss time with that injury he's dealing with, Luther Burden could be a must start each and every week in a very good offense. So he is a must roster player. Okay, let's move on to Jaden Higgins. Now, what you need to know about Jaden Higgins, this is the week 6 buzz, according to Dan Graziano. They actually mentioned the Texans front office said they would like to find ways to get Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel more involved in the offense. In deeper leagues, you can talk about Jalen Noel and maybe adding him if they end up getting rid of Christian Kirk's role. But even the GM Nick Caserio, said it seems like when you throw him the ball, Jaden Higgins, he catches it and usually something positive happens. That's typically what you want to see, continual progress and continual improvement. So don't forget that rookies, guys who aren't first round picks in particular, it often takes a little while for them to be important pieces to their offenses. So over the course of the next couple weeks, you're hoping that this wide receiver room becomes much more concise. You see less Xavier Hutchinson, right? You see less Christian Kirk, and maybe, just maybe, there is an important role for Jaden Higgins out there. We know he's talented. We know he has a good quarterback to throw him the ball. He could be one of these surprise late, guys that end up winning your championship, like the Amon-Ra St. Browns in his rookie season. I'm not guaranteeing that, but it's something that we should definitely monitor, obviously, moving forward. All right, the next name here is Jalen Coker, and no, I can't tell you anything positive that has happened this year, but this team was very excited about him before he got injured and went on the IR. If you don't know, last year in 2024, he started to become very important to this team towards the end of the year, specifically week 15 onwards, where he had 1 game over 21 points, another game almost 14 points. He had multiple games over 5 targets, a game over 62 yards, 110 yards. He could be a very important piece to an improving Carolina Panthers offense, specifically out of the slot. We've seen so many years Bryce Young heavily target his slot wide receivers. Coker should be rostered. All right, next, let's talk about Alec Manor, who has shown plenty of flashes this year. He's been the best Titans receiver, if we're being honest. Now, like we said earlier, Titans have parted ways with Brian Callahan, so who knows what's going to happen with this entire offense. Not only that, but Calvin Ridley has sustained a hamstring injury, so he's not going to be out there for the vast majority of the next couple weeks. Who knows what sort of changes they could make, but Alec Manor could be featured in this offense. All right, at number 5, let's talk about Kayshon Boutte. Look, this is a guy that I was really hyped about after week 1 because, at one point he was a 5-star recruit. He was considered a top 10 pick before his injury at LSU, but it just never really panned out. And then we started to see Stephon Diggs get more involved and less involvement for Kayshon Boutte. I'm not as high on this situation because I've already been burnt by it. I'd love to be proven wrong, right? I'd love to start seeing some consistency for Kayshon Boutte, but I'm not sure we're really going to see that. So he's a little bit lower on my list. I think every week it'll be a different Patriots wide receiver. Okay, let's talk about Jack Besh. Now, here's the great news for Jack Besh. Shout out to Chris Wecht over on X. He said the Raiders finally woke up and put their second-round rookie wide receiver on the field. Jack Besh ran 80% of the team's routes this past week, while fellow rookie wide receiver Deontay Thornton played just 3% of the snaps. If you guys have been watching this channel, you will already know about Jack Besh. We talked about him last week. But yes, he played a career-high snap percentage, 75%, which is great, but he also had just 1 target. So that's also not good to see. But like he mentioned, just 3% of the snaps for Deontay Thornton. And what a lot of people missed last week is Pete Carroll talking about how Thornton is a project and they're probably not going to rely on him much the rest of the year. So I do think Jack Bech should be rostered. If they decide to start targeting him, he could be an important part of that offense, especially, again, if there's a trade for Jacoby Myers. Okay, Jordan Whittington. Look, if Puka Nacua misses time, he would be a fine flex play. You know, we did talk about this in the waiver video, but last year in weeks 4 and 5, you saw no Puka Nacua. Jordan Whittington had 12 and 15.9 point games in fantasy football. It's a great passing attack. The Rams can support more than one wide receiver, so he's worth mentioning. I want to quickly talk about Tez Johnson. Now, obviously, with Tez Johnson, it's going to be a little bit difficult because not only is Tez Johnson going to get targets without, you know, all these injuries to the wide receivers in Tampa Bay, but also Cameron Johnson will get some work. Beyond Cameron Johnson, we know the veteran Sterling Shepard will get some work. So Tez Johnson's the most exciting to me because he played 72% of the snaps last week versus San Francisco, whereas Cameron Johnson played about 49% of the snaps. Sterling Shepard played about 49% of the snaps. So I think Tez Johnson has the most to gain from all the injuries. But again, when Egbuka is back, when Mike Evans is back, when Chris Godwin is back, it's hard to really see how much long-term upside there is. Okay, we can talk about Isaiah Bond quickly, who has become an important part of this offense. He has become a starting wide receiver for the Browns, right? From 28 to 38, 65, and then up to 87% of the snaps this last week. But the problem is he might get 10 targets in Cleveland and they might not be valuable at all. Like, that's just the reality of owning Isaiah Bond at this point. But young, talented rookie wide receiver should be rostered. Darius Slayton, we have seen how good this offense is in New York, how good Jackson Dart is, and Darius Slayton would be the outside wide receiver that we would all probably covet if, you know, this offense ended up being worth something. So he should be rostered. And then lastly, Christian Watson, with the injury to Dontavion Wicks, if Watson comes back in the next couple weeks, it will only be really Golden, Dobbs, and Watson. So there could be some value there in deep, deep, deep leagues. Okay, let's jump to the tight ends and the quarterback. Starting off with tight end, number one is Harold Fannin. If for whatever reason he's available, David Njoku did sustain a knee injury versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. We don't exactly know how, devastating that knee injury is just yet. It doesn't sound like it'll be anything too serious. But since Daniel Gabriel has taken over as the starter for this team, we have back-to-back weeks over 11 PPR points for Harold Fannin, 1 week in the end zone. He had 10 targets last week. Dylan Gabriel is not stretching the field, but he is effectively running a simple offense, and Harold Fannin is benefiting from that. This week, he's a top 12 play at the position. How about Oronde Gadsden, who keeps impressing with the Los Angeles Chargers? Obviously, week 3 versus Denver was a big breakout for him. 26% of the snaps, caught 5 of 7 targets. Then this week versus Miami with no Quentin Johnston, I will give you, he played 75% of the snaps. That's career high. 8 targets, a career high in receptions, receiving yards. I mean, if this continues, he could be a weekly starter each and every week. All right, how about Mason Taylor? Obviously, we all know Garrett Wilson sustained an injury. How long will he be out? The great news for Mason Taylor is he faces the Carolina Panthers this week. That's a top 5 matchup for your fantasy tight ends. And I just don't know who the hell else Justin Fields is going to target outside of Mason Taylor, right? It's probably going to be Mason Taylor. We already talked about Isaiah Likely with the Mark Andrews trade rumors. How about Evan Ingram? This is a little bit more sneaky. Since week 4, he is starting to get more and more involved in the offense. 6 or more targets from week 4 onwards. And, kind of in that 30 to 40 receiving yards range. But if they ever get him on the field more than 50% of the snaps, he could be a legit receiving threat for that offense. Last tight end I want to talk about is Colson Loveland. Now, here's the good news. He tied a career high in targets on Monday Night Football with 3. Here's the bad news. They're still heavily using Cole Kmet. But at any point, if Cole Kmet goes away, Loveland will be an incredible start each and every week. So talented. Okay, at quarterback, the long-term stash is Jackson Dart, right? We're talking about a guy that's had over 50 rushing yards in each of his first 3 starts. I mean, not even Jaden Daniels did that last year, right, in his first 3 starts. So his floor on the ground is so safe. He has 2 rushing touchdowns in 3 NFL starts, and he looks really competent through the air. Even without Malik Neighbors, he looks like a great start. The reason I'm not so high on him is because they face Denver and then Philly in their next 2 games. That's just a really rough schedule. So he can overcome it. Philly was technically, a bad game in week 6 and he overcame it. So he's a long-term stash, if anything. Okay, for this week, you could start Jared Goff, who faces the Tampa Bay Bucks in a high over-under. Deep, pulling into our bag if you need a streamer this week is Aaron Rodgers on Thursday Night Football. He plays the Bengals. Bengals are a top 3 matchup for your fantasy quarterbacks, so he's worth looking at. And in the deepest of leagues, you can consider Spencer Rattler. Okay, Spencer Rattler has actually been a decent threat on the ground. That's been fun to see. He faces the Bears, who give up the 7th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. That's only break glass scenarios. All right, before we get into some deep league stashes, here are 6 players I'm putting into my DFS lineups this week. Want to highlight names like, the Commanders versus the Cowboys, highest over-under of the week, should be a barn burner. Rashee Rice, first game back, we're putting him straight into our DFS lineups. And then Rome Odunze versus the Saints. We saw what the Patriots did through the air last week versus the Saints. What could Rome Odunze do? I want to find out. Now, if you want to play in this contest, Quick 6 Super Slam, all you got to do is download the FastDraft app, use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you're going to get my week 7 rankings completely free. You can check that out in the description if you want to have some fun. Let's go on to week 8 defenses. All right, so first things first is the Colts face the Titans. And again, this has been widely requested, this segment. It's not for this week, it's for next week, so you can get ahead of the waiver wire, right? If you played with defenses in your league. The Colts play the Titans. Smash matchup next week. The Patriots versus the Browns, the Bills at the Panthers, and the Bucks at the Saints. Those are some options you can consider to stash this week before next week. They're the hot waiver wire pickups. And lastly, some deep league stashes. If you're out there and you're in a 16 plus team league, these are names that you can consider stashing. The one name I want to highlight here is Adonai Mitchell. Now, Adonai Mitchell, there are talks about him potentially being traded. So if that were to happen, could he go to New York? I mean, he could instantly be their best outside wide receiver. He's definitely worth monitoring. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love, subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.